Hopefully, another fantasy hockey week of dominance is in the books, and we're headed into the weekend on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast Friday edition, wrapping up everything that you need to know from around the world of the NHL. And of course, we got Friday's big time bets, baby. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're on the road for the latest edition of your daily source for fantasy hockey news, betting breakdowns, and all of the NHL news that you need to build a winner. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with your boy Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We apologize for a few spotty episodes this week, but you guys know what it is. We get you in and out in 30 minutes or under with all the fantasy takes, NHL news, betting breakdowns that you need Monday through Friday. Couldn't be doing it without y'all. Hope you've been feeling a couple of these solo episodes. I'll be back Monday. Waiver wire targets are becoming increasingly critical. Not many weeks left if you're a GM on the outside right now looking in to make some moves. So stay tapped in for Monday's waiver wire episode. Today's show, I'm talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets. We've spoken about them a lot, but they deserve some credit. 6 straight wins. I'll start there. Tristan Jarry. It's been a couple of days since Jarry was placed on waivers now, but I want to talk about it. I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins as well and the Boston Bruins. I'm staying in the East once again. I will talk about Western Conference teams next week, I promise. But right now it seems like there's a lot going on in the Eastern Conference, and this race for the wild card is absolutely tight. So I want to talk about these Columbus Blue Jackets. 5th right now in goals per game. 9th best power play unit. They have the 6th best shots on net per game at almost 30 shots per game. And they have 6 straight dubs. So we got to pay attention to it. We've been saying this all year, that this is the perfect young team, week-to-week flyers. You add them and they're valuable, but some of these pieces are not just flyers anymore. Kirill Marchenko, great season. Dmitry Voronkov, great season. Kent Johnson, since returning, 12 goals, 14 assists for 26 points. All of these pieces are top 6 forwards on a team that is scoring a ton of goals right now. I want to pull up overall goals for. I believe they're in the top 5. They're tied for the Colorado Avalanche at 4th most goals in the NHL this season at 152. That's straight up impressive. And we have to pay attention to it because there is fantasy value to be had here. And the real stud of this whole show, and perhaps the anchor that has been making this happen at the offensive end, has been the play of Zach Werenski on the blue line. We also know Merzlikins has been one of those goaltenders that has had his struggles. Daniel Tarasov has been ho-hum in the cage this year, 862 save percentage. To me, this all comes down to coaching behind the bench. Love what the coaching staff is doing with this young team in Columbus, and it's got to be Big Z, Zach Werenski on the blue line. What a sensational season. And yeah, I got the old notepad out today, kids, because we are on the road, but I got a couple of stats here. Werenski's home point streak is up to 18 games. That's the 6th longest home point streak in NHL history. There's a couple of names on that list that rhyme with Bobby Orr. That's a full stop situation for a player that has been a little bit of a polarizing fantasy piece, given his somewhat inability to stay in the lineup. This season, there's no qualms, questions, or beefs. 51 points in 45 games for Werenski. Absolutely beasting across the peripheral category. 74 block shots. 178 shots on net. He's going to well eclipse his career high of previous 216. He has been so legit and so important to Columbus's success. I had to come on here and discuss it once again. Columbus Blue Jackets, one of the best home teams in the league this year, 16-5-3 at home this season. They're 8-2-0 in their last 10. I want a piece of this Columbus Blue Jackets team fantasy-wise in a very, very big way right now. I reeled off some of those names. If you can go out there and get yourself a piece, Voronkov, Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, obviously going to be more difficult. Werenski is not going to be an option for you. If you're a GM that's invested into him, kudos to you because you probably got him at an excellent round, given some of those injury concerns headed into draft season that I mentioned. And let me wrap up with the Columbus Blue Jackets before I get to Jarry and the Pens, before I get to the Boston Bruins, which is its own situation. And, of course, Big Time Bets Friday. We only got 2 games on the board, but I got my lock of the night ready to roll. It's an old faithful, and you know where I'm headed with that. We'll talk about it. It's Adam Fantilli. The opportunity that he's had with Sean Monahan on the shelf, who should continue to stay there for the next little while, and I said this, with Adam Fantilli, 8-game point streak right now for Fantilli. If he continues to do this, considering what they have invested into this kid, and he is that number 1 center of their future, I could totally see Sean Monahan returning and taking that second spot, the second line center spot, which is currently being occupied by Cole Sillinger, playing alongside JVR, another sneaky good ad there, and Kent Johnson. I could see Fantilli staying up on that top line. He's already seen some very nice chemistry with Marchenko. That's one of those angles that fantasy-wise, pay attention to. Still a couple of weeks away from Monahan, but get yourself a piece of the Columbus Blue Jackets if you can. I mentioned those 6 straight wins. They're hovering around here. They were the first wild card spot, 50 points, 22, 17, and 6 on the season. So take a real serious look at this Columbus Blue Jackets team. Something that I'm doing the same for with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And look, Tristan Jarry, I think, has actually been a relatively reliable goaltender over his career. Looking at his numbers before today's episode, I believe he's still on his career rocking a save percentage north of 910. I'm going to check that right now. This is a guy who I think this is all between the ears for Tristan Jarry, much like what's going on with the Boston Bruins. I don't like what I'm seeing at all from this Pittsburgh franchise, just on and off the ice. In his career, Tristan Jarry, 910 save percentage, 2.75 goals against average, and almost 20 shutouts. He's been very valuable fantasy-wise. He's just been super inconsistent. 8-8-4 this season, 3.31 goals against, and an 884 save percentage. Has he been a reason why the Pittsburgh Penguins are this bad? Yes, he's not the only reason, though, and I'll talk a little bit more about it right after the break. I'm also going to get to these Boston Bruins because I'm not done shaming clubs in the Eastern Conference just yet. We'll wrap up today's episode with, of course, what we do at the end of every episode, big time bets. But first, I got to show a little bit of love to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can be placing some of these big-time bets coming up at the end of the episode. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Go Bills, baby. Big weekend coming up for NFL bettors. And right now, new customers that bet $5 get $300 in bonus bets if your first bet hits. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app, so easy to navigate, and a wide variety of bets that keeps every game exciting. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with that $300 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Giddy up, my friends. Happy Friday. I hope it's been another good week of fantasy hockey dominance. We hope trying to put some money in that pocketbook via bets, via taking it down in your fantasy leagues. Hope it's been a good season. We're past that halfway mark now. I got my bold predictions coming up next week. I've been teasing it. I promised you some of these predictions, they come true, and that will help your team get over the top. The Pittsburgh Penguins have been bad this season. And looking at some of these numbers, I have them down here. They are 7th in the Metro right now. They have the worst goal differential in the Eastern Conference at minus 36, and they have allowed more goals than the San Jose Sharks. They have allowed more goals than the Chicago Blackhawks. They have allowed more goals against than the Philadelphia Flyers at 169. That's the most in the NHL. That's straight up bad. And yeah, Tristan Jarry and the goaltending for sure has played a part in this situation. I mentioned his numbers this season, but the team in front of him are just not good. And when you have a forward group that is realistically only anchored by you know who and Sidney Crosby, and I'm going to talk about Sidney Crosby at the end of the episode, tease to bets. This is just going to be one of those situations that fantasy-wise, I think I talked about Michael Bunting a couple of weeks ago. If Michael Bunting is the fantasy value, that piece that's jumping off the page right now, be very wary of anyone on this team not named Sidney Crosby. And even then, Sid has gone quiet at times over the last couple of weeks. And I've actually been throwing Sid's name out there in some trade offers because, his value might be somewhat low given his up and down performances of late, and again, I'm going to put a lot of that on his teammates around him for not performing as well. You could perhaps get a very sexy piece if you're in the keeper dynasty side of things for Sidney Crosby. The time is coming to move off of this player. When I see how bad the Pittsburgh Penguins are, it's pushing me in that direction more and more. I'm getting back in there. There's off-ice issues there, or distractions, I should say, not issues. I think his house got burglarized. I'm not trying to say just because of that, this is a team you want to get away from. But, man, the back end is ragtag as well. I love Crystal Tang. Erik Karlsson is who he is. But this team, seriously, unless it's Sid, I'm being so wary of these pieces, aside from when a Michael Bunting pops up. He goes off for a bunch of PIMs. He's been doing okay. The deployment on the power play, you got to dig into the trenches, sure. But when I look at those numbers, I look at the goal differential I mentioned, goals against, I know shots against per game. They're also fourth worst in the NHL. They're allowing almost 31 shots per game. All of these things add up to tell me stay away from this squad with an absolute 10-foot pole. Right now, it's going to be Nedeljkovic in that cage. It's been mostly a 50-50 split. Goaltenders, you know how I feel about them. Going to be very tricky to get a ton of value out of Alex Nedeljkovic, but he is going to be that number one guy now. It was pretty much a split this season. I believe they were right there. So Nedeljkovic, 7-7-4 with a 3.40 goals against average and an 886 save percentage. Those numbers are just bad. The next little schedule for the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, because at some point you're going to have to go out there and you need a goaltender. And right now, Nedeljkovic, because of that lion's share that he should catch, I actually like him over the next week and a half, because take this in. Penguins, they got the Ducks, they got the Kraken, they got the Sharks, they got the Utah Yeti, they got the Predators, and then they got the Rangers. So all of those games, I actually love the next little stretch here for Nedeljkovic. So that's the angle here that I think, as much as he has not been good, and I just talked about how bad the Pittsburgh Penguins are, there's an angle here that astute fantasy GMs who are in need of some starts, who are in need of a quote-unquote number one goaltender, Nedeljkovic might be that guy. So tap into it, especially while this schedule is soft. I'll get to bets right after the break. I do quickly want to talk about these Boston Bruins, however, before I get there. Because when I also read into what's going on here in Boston, a team that, as I record and say this, sit barely holding on to the second and final wild card spot at 49 points. And I look at teams around them. Blue Jackets, Senators, even the Red Hot Canadiens, Detroit Red Wings, and teams farther down the list in like the sleeping giant New York Rangers. I really don't see it for this Boston Bruins club. This is a team that we also know headed into this season was going to really struggle to score goals. And guess what's happening? Exactly that. And I don't know if I'm here, like, I got to talk about obviously all this off ice stuff, but the fact that they are just that soft up the middle, that they just do not have that scoring depth, that scoring punch, that, like, even just to go through a team in their own division in the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're going to have to do something. And Cam Neely, the front office executive, talking about how he's preparing for two paths, one that they make the playoffs and one that they don't, is like the worst, most boring cop-out answer I've ever heard from a front office executive that has really been making a mess of things, in my opinion. In Boston, they've had so many off-ice distractions, coaching change, all of the front office criticisms that I was just alluding to, Swayman struggles on the ice, proposed locker room beefs. There is just something off in the water in Boston. It doesn't feel right to me at all. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes. I got to show some love to those everydayers, holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. This is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We come every single day, Monday through Friday. Make sure you're checking it out. Check out all the content across the Locked On Fantasy Sports Network. We got you covered. Hoops, college hoops, everything you need right here on the Locked On Network. I got to get to big time bets. So let's get to it. 2 games on the board. Every single episode, we wrap up the show with big time bets. I'll flip the page on the old notebook. Bear with me if there was some sketchy Wi-Fi. I'm up north, trying to hold it down for y'all. The Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, are rolling into Buffalo to play the Sabres Friday night. 18-20-8, the Pittsburgh Penguins. 17-22-5 for the Buffalo Sabres. This is an ugly one, kids. But guess what? I'll kick it off with my lock of the night and get it out of the way early. Sidney Crosby, 12 goals, 36 assists this season. Gone a little bit quiet of late, only 1 goal in his last 5 games. But when he's on his game and what he does best is distribute, create high danger scoring chances for his teammates, and feed the biscuit around. In 60 career regular season games against the Buffalo Sabres, 85 points, including 56 assists. Hit me with my lock of the night. Sidney Crosby, anytime assist. I like this game for a high scoring one as well. So I love Sid to be on the score sheet. Considering he's been somewhat quiet as well, you're going to get a good odd here. He's only got, 1 assist in his last 3 games. So that's going to prop up your odd nicely. And then I'll slide into my next pick. 2 picks coming from this Vegas Golden Knights, Carolina Hurricanes situation. I'm loving the odd here for the Vegas Golden Knights on the road. They're 14-5 in their last 19 games. They're 8-3 in their last 11 games on the road. One of the best road teams in the NHL this season. I understand that they're 3-5-2 in their last 10 games against Carolina, but Carolina has actually looked pretty bad over their last 2 games, dropping 2 ugly ones to Anaheim and Buffalo. 4-2, 3-2. They squeak out a 2-0 win against Vancouver, but that's a bad team as well. So I'm not really liking what I've been seeing from the Carolina Hurricanes over the last couple of games, and Vegas rolls in. You're going to get a good odd. So hit me with the Vegas Golden Knights on the road, the team that looks a lot better right now. And for that value, I'm going to take all day. They're also coming off a pretty frustrating loss that they should have had against the Nashville Predators. Some of these intangibles are what I'm reading into. So Sid, anytime assist, that's the lock of the night. Hit me with the Vegas Golden Knights on the money line. I'm going to parlay these all together so I don't hate taking Jack Eichel anytime point. He has held off the score sheet in his previous game. He's been held off the score sheet completely in 2 of his last 3. So again, those anytime point odds are going to be propped up slightly. Smash that with the Knights on the money line. Smash it with Sidney Crosby anytime assist. I love all 3 of those picks, especially my lock of the night. You know how I feel about Captain Canada, Sidney Crosby. You know how I feel about all of y'all holding us down and making us your first listen every single day. Fantasy hockey, NHL news, betting breakdowns every single day, 30 minutes in and out. We got you covered. Thank you for holding us down over the last couple of days while the episodes have been a bit spotty. Monday, waiver wire special. Make sure you're tapping in. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you then.